What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking Season 2, Episode 4 of Ruthless Aggression. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Resurrection of Shawn Michaels. Now, when I saw the preview for this episode and the teases for it and the intro for the second season of the show, I thought this episode would be all about D-Generation X. But the entire episode was actually about the second run of Shawn Michaels in the 2000s, which was way better. The DX stuff was good, and they do cover that, obviously. But they talk about his return to the ring in 2002, coming back into his form, feuding with Hulk Hogan they talk about, the DX stuff, feuding with John Cena, and then going out on a high note at WrestleMania 26. Obviously coming back at Crown Jewel in 2018. They don't talk about that. They don't even mention it. But still, I thought this was a great episode. All the episodes so far have been very entertaining. This might have been my favorite one to date, though. So to open the episode, we hear from Rob Van Dam, who had many a battle with Shawn Michaels over the 2000s. And he talks about how Shawn Michaels set the precedent for the business moving forward, kind of moving toward the more athletic guys starting in the mid-90s. You know, him, Bret Hart, people like that. Bruce Pritchard calls him the greatest worker to ever lace up a pair of boots, but he had an attitude and he was difficult to deal with. But he does say his talent outweighed the attitude. Michael Cole just flat out says he was a dick, and obviously they bleep out dick. He was one of the biggest stars in the industry by 1998, but at the Royal Rumble in 1998, in the casket match with The Undertaker, he crushed several discs in his back when he fell awkwardly on the casket. Kevin Nash says it must have been hard for him. Nash was out of the company at that point. He was in WCW, but being close with Shawn, he knew it was probably hard for him going into WrestleMania that year. And it was soon after, obviously, he retired after WrestleMania that year, losing the championship to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Did not wrestle again. And it was during his time off that he developed an addiction to pain medication. He was still used in a variety of roles on TV as a commissioner, as a commentator, as a manager, but he doesn't outright admit this, but they kind of speculate, Pritchard specifically, I think, had said that maybe he felt less than, not being in the ring and feeling like, not that he was underutilized, but could have been a bigger star on the show had he been able to wrestle. And that added to his displeasure at that point. Triple H recalls him coming into the locker room one day in just an absolute mess. It was like him, Taker, maybe Steve and someone else, and Shawn just came in, was an absolute mess. So Shawn then cleaned up his life. He went home, started a family. His wife Rebecca got back into Bible study, and it spoke to him as well. And through that, he wanted to be a role model to his own kids. So Bruce Pritchard sees Shawn starting up his own wrestling school. He visited him there and sees that he's happy. And he told him, hey, if you can go out and be that guy on TV, I think you can get it done. So Shawn came back to Raw on the June 3rd, one day removed from my birthday, 2002 edition of Raw as the newest member of the NWO, knocking Booker T out of the group, and obviously that was short-lived. The group was disbanded about a month later on TV. And it was around that point that things started to shift for the better in every aspect of Shawn Michaels' life, he talks about. We hear from X-Pac, and he even says that Shawn changed. Kane said that for the first time he was kind of in it more for the company as opposed to just himself, and Shawn was happy to be back. It looked like he was happy to be back. From a fan perspective, even from Gargano's perspective, it looked like Shawn was very happy to be back. But when he first came back in June of that year, he had no intention of wrestling. But being at ringside for all these matches, he still felt like he could physically do it, but do it in a limited fashion. And he also felt like he could make a difference. So he thought of the SummerSlam match as a one-off. It was never supposed to be a full-on return to the ring and lead to an 8-year run in the company. They made it an unsanctioned street fight because they didn't know what he could do. And Triple H gets emotional, recalling an emotional interaction that he had backstage of the show that night in Nassau Coliseum in Long Island with Shawn's mom. And Shawn basically told Triple H, please take care of my boy. I would love that. She was like obviously way more dramatic and emotional than how I just said it, because she didn't know what he was capable of and thought his back was in really, really bad shape. Triple H thought, is the guy going to shatter if I punch him? Like, what's going to go on here? So they weren't really sure, yet they went out there and had this amazing match, and Shawn had this comfort of being in there with his best friend of all people, and he quickly proved to Triple H that he was still that good in the ring. Ended up beating Triple H that night with a roll-up, just a fantastic match, and when Shawn went back to the curtain, Vince, I guess, told him, oh, I knew you could do it. Shawn's like, all right, hold your horses, So it was a couple of weeks after that Vince actually called up Shawn on the phone and told him, hey, We got this idea for an Elimination Chamber match. The first ever Elimination Chamber match at Survivor Series 02 that we talked about on the Innovations episode a few days ago. And it was in that match, not only did he compete and go back to the ring for the first time since SummerSlam, he won the World Heavyweight Championship that night. And Brian Gewirtz talked about, hey, like, listen, maybe if this guy's going to be around, we don't know how long he's going to be around for, let's use him. Let's use him in a limited capacity. And Shawn's like, well, I guess I'm back. So from there, he proved time and time and time again that the guy still had it. He was capable of a lot more than people thought, and he constantly delivered, and he lit it up every single time. Every match he had, Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 19. It's a bummer they couldn't get him for this one, because obviously he hasn't been in the company for a few years now, but he and Shawn had an amazing match at WrestleMania 19. Kurt Angle says the WrestleMania 21 match was the best he ever had. Now, I think he has said elsewhere that the Benoit match at Rumble 03 might have been his favorite or best. Obviously, he can't say that on here, but if it's not that one, then it's probably this one. Maybe this is his greatest of all time in his opinion. I don't know, but for some reason I had thought he had said elsewhere the Benoit one was his number one, but again, he's not going to say that here. Still, he didn't say it was one of his best. He said it was the best. But anyway, so Shawn proved he was not a nostalgia act. He was as good, if not better, than he'd ever been at any point in his career. They talk about how he wanted to work with Hogan, never really had that feather in his cap until 2005, and turning heel that summer before the match gave him a chance to have some fun. They relived the Montreal promo when Bret Hart came out, or he didn't come out, and they played the music. Just a legendary Raw segment. They also recap the SummerSlam match, where they don't outright talk about it here. They kind of tongue-in-cheek poke fun of the fact that Shawn did not want to do the job, and he oversold, and the match took on a life of its own. It was an electric atmosphere in D.C. for that match. And then Cole, I don't know if he was there, but he called it an electric atmosphere as if he was there, so I'll take his word for it. But they made the match, or Shawn made the match, as entertaining as possible, and he has no regrets about it, he says. So at WrestleMania 22, facing Vince in a street fight, he did the DX chop on top of the ladder in the match. And then Triple H later on in the show, when he faced John Cena for the WWE Championship, also did a DX chop. So people are starting to think, all right, what is this supposed to be planting the seeds for? Are they going to be doing a DX reunion here? I don't know if that was ever the plan, to do a DX reunion, until they started teasing it themselves. They finally reunited on the June 12, 2006 edition of Raw to a big pop. Adam Cole thought it would never happen. And they obviously couldn't be hip and cool anymore because they were older, but they did different stuff instead, poked fun of the McMahons, had that great impersonation segment, which was just, I wasn't a fan at the time, but like a fan of the product, like watching wrestling at that point. But watching it back, that segment is just one of my favorites. It's amazing. It was during which point that Cena was working his way through the ranks and establishing himself as the franchise player in WWE. So WrestleMania 23 was supposed to be Cena and Triple H the rematch from WrestleMania 22, but Triple H got injured in the DX versus Rated RKO match in New Year's Revolution 07. So Shawn served as Triple H's replacement against Cena at 23. There was always the question among fans if, they knew Cena could go, but could he go against one of the greatest of all time in Shawn Michaels? And they proved that he could. Cena says that you can perform with Shawn Michaels forever and you got to trust the process. Shawn also praises him and calls Cena a good dude. And they don't really talk about the hour-long match on Raw a couple of weeks later, but I would argue that one was better. But it was after a match like that he kind of came to the realization that this run has been awesome for him. And obviously he went on to wrestle a few more years after that. But he was very happy to elevate guys like Cena, like Orton, like Edge, people like that. Kevin Nash called him a star maker. We hear from Randy Orton, we hear from JBL, both of whom praise him. Shawn Michaels helped Shelton Benjamin learn how to slow down in the ring, and Benjamin has a lot of great things to say about Shawn as well from their few matches together. And Shawn, in coming back in 2002, got to fix his reputation from before he retired in 98. He was always one of the greatest of all time, but he had that attitude issue, and that would always be an asterisk on his legacy. No more, starting in 02. Obviously people won't forget about that stuff, but he kind of had the chance to redeem himself starting in 2002. Nash compares that second run to Michael Jordan, in basketball, obviously, and Gargano says the second run was, in his opinion, way better than the first run, which it's debatable, but, I would probably say so myself, but I kind of grew up in that second era of Shawn, that second run of Shawn, so I'm biased as well. But anyway, he went on to have one of the greatest matches ever, they say, at WrestleMania 25 against The Undertaker. They made magic again a year later at WrestleMania 26 in his swan song, retiring that same night in that match. Shawn says that the people he kind of came in the business with, people like Triple H and The Undertaker, he has seen and spent more time with than his own family. That brotherhood is real, he says, and he got to cement his Hall of Fame legacy with that run, and he calls his life surreal. in the end. So at any rate, this was a great episode. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought they did a great job of kind of recapping his second run from start to finish. Just a lot of great moments, and they recap a lot of great stuff here, including the Hogan feud and the DX stuff and everything else. But yeah, I'm looking forward to what this last episode has in store, focusing on OVW, which I'm hoping to break down tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. But nonetheless, guys, thank you for checking on this review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. And if you haven't already, check out my interview with Braun Breaker from NXT ahead of War Games tonight. That went up today, and it's in video form as well. I don't ordinarily do video interviews, especially with the WWE talent, but I did with Braun Breaker, so check that out when you get a chance. Have an awesome one, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.